This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
Moving to Vegas? There's no better time than now. Where can you find a 3-bedroom home with a balcony and patio, with upgraded flooring, all appliances included, newly painted, move-in ready, with a community park and pool for under $400,000? Not to mention that it is so convenient to shopping, schools, entertainment. And of course, what is Vegas without the Strip? So what are you waiting for? Call Benjamina today at 702-281-9063. Mia is also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can also visit www.benjaminamiacasino.com and view available homes anytime. Remember, the house wins when you bet on Benjamina Mia Casino. On the Dot is presented by Benjamina Mia Casino. Licensed real estate professional since 2008. License number S01669991 LLC. It's a lunch hour in Vegas, and we're on the Dot with Dot and Mia here on PHLV Radio.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, if that's what you call this, PHLV Radio on the Dot. My name is Dot. Dorothy-to, my partner Mia, is taking a break right now. She's on a health break, I would call it, because she wasn't feeling very well this morning when she woke up. So hi Mia, hope you are watching and get healed, because our special guest will be sending you healing energy later. That's what he said. But anyway, I just want to emphasize that this show is brought to you in cooperation with the University of the Philippines Alumni Association of Nevada, and of course PHLV Radio. We have a big project coming up, or maybe let's say it's in the middle of things. The Himig Musika or Himig songwriting competition, and I wish Mia would be able to talk more about that, but she's not here. So anyway, we have big things cooking up for you regarding the songwriting contest. And so today is the third Wednesday, I suppose. Well, this is the third day, the third episode of our month, Writer's Block. It's not about having a block, having a break. You can't think about what to write about, but it's about the block for writers. And our topic, our title created by Mia is Back on Track. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest. I knew him first from the collaboration we did with Laura DeFranco in The Ultimate Guide to Self-Healing Volume 4. I think he was one of the two men in that collaboration of 25 authors. And I was so impressed with what he did, what he wrote. And so he came up with another book, another collab. And we are so blessed to have him here. His name, and I am proud to pronounce it. I will read the whole name because it's so amazing. James, well, hold on, I lost my page. Okay, James James Kawainui. Kawainui. Okay, that's James. James is a native Hawaiian healer, mentor, and teacher with family roots going back over 20 generations in Hawaii. He comes from a family of shamans, right, of his culture, and he brings that ancient wisdom into the work he does with people. Over 20 years ago, how do you pronounce this? Kupuna?
Kupuna, yes, that's ancestors in Hawaiian.
Ancestors spoke to him for the first time and led him to understand and become open to his healing abilities. And I'm not going to read the whole thing about James because he will talk about them. All right, welcome, James.
All right, aloha, everybody.
Aloha.
And I actually happen to be in Hawaii right now because I live in Arizona, but I'm home visiting family. So I just happen to be here right now. So aloha and good morning.
Good morning to you. What time is it from where you are right now?
9 a.m. It's a 3-hour difference between the West Coast and Hawaii. So.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's early. It's still mid-morning for you, right? Yeah. And for us, it's noontime. And tell us a little bit about you. Before we went on air, James, you were talking about the vowels, how vowels are pronounced in the reading of your name and other Hawaiian words. And I said, it's the same thing with us Filipinos. And James said something about Filipinos. Tell us about that, James, if you can.
Well, Hawaiian, just like the Filipino language, is very phonetic. And so if you break everything into syllables and you look for the vowels, and you pronounce them, then you're doing, you're going to be okay. So just like aloha, so it's aloha, or Hawaii, right? Or in case of my name, Kawainui. And each of those pieces actually have separate meanings, so that when you start putting words together, the word may mean different things. Depending on how the combinations are, right? Mm. So if you're here, like there's a street in Hilo that I'm thinking about. It's called Kanoi Lehua. And when you look at all of the letters together, it kind of looks like it's jumbled. But if you, like I said, if you take it in pieces, it's easier and you'll get through it a lot faster and a lot easier, quicker, actually. So, yeah.
And you said earlier when I mentioned that it's the same as how we read our vowels in the Philippines. It's for us, it's short vowel sounds. We don't have the A, E, I, O, U. We have the A, E, I, O, U. So you're familiar with Filipino words.
Yeah, same as in Hawaii. It's A, E, O, U. So it's not the long vowels, it's the short vowels too.
Okay. And how come you're familiar with Filipinos?
Well, I grew up in a Filipino household, and a large part of my family is Filipino and still here in Hawaii. I grew up on a coffee farm, and we raised coffee. I was on a farm till we were about 11 or 12. But my father's family comes from Hana, from Maui, and he grew up on a pineapple plantation in Maui. And then his family moved to Molokai, which is where he met my mom. He is the middle child, or around the middle of 11 children.
11.
So our family is really big, and my mom is the youngest of 6. And so when our family, this is kind of the crazy thing, and I think Filipinos understand this, when you come together for dinner, there's not only 5 or 6, there's like 20 or 30 or more,
Exactly.
So growing up, that was kind of our culture, or our tradition was large groups of people, and everybody cooks. So I'm the oldest of 8 in my family, and we all learned how to cook. And it's funny because when we were getting ready for my mom's memorial a couple of weekends ago, we were making a joke because we were down in my brother's garage one morning, and we were making bento boxes for someone, right? So we had to make 140 bento boxes, right? I know, that's a lot. But we were laughing because, I was watching the next generation come in. And they were there, and they were helping put together the bento boxes too, right? Hawaii is a mixture of cultures. So, we talk about different cultures all the time. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we talked about was that all of us on our resumes could put short order cook and caterer as part of what we know, because that's how we grew up, you know. And so doing all of those things, I think I remembered how to clean a pig when I was like 6 years old, you know, and chickens and everything else, because we had chickens and we had pigs on our farm, right? That's something that people don't even understand anymore, you know, and we kept everything, you know. Filipino dish, you know, is the blood. I don't know what everybody calls it. We called it diniguan here.
Yeah, correct. So, you got it.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's catching the blood and stirring it with the vinegar when it comes out of the pig and using that. And then the insides, you know, we use the intestines and the stomach and everything else like that. And the best part was when we were doing that was the fire that was right there, because we cooked right as we were doing everything, you know. And you take the green papaya and you scrub the skin to make it soft and clean. So it was all those traditions that I understood and I grew up with, you know.
Wow, that's so fascinating, because you're reminding me of things that I have forgotten for so long, because, well, I stopped eating pork back in 2004. So
I understand.
So the pig became my friend, so to speak, and the cow as well. But anyway,
I don't eat it anymore either. So coming home, and because, you know, the diet here is very pork heavy, it was a challenge for my wife and I, because she doesn't either, you know. So I ate some of it, and only because there was a memory that was involved in it. But I hadn't ate it in so long that my body did not like it at all.
Yeah.
You know? So, but I had to taste it because they were memories of my childhood.
Yes, yes. And in keeping with the title of the book that you have, the recent one, Transcendent Men. So it feels like if you could eat a piece of pork, you are transcending. For me, that's my take on it. You have the capability to transcend whatever it is that you're putting into your body for that moment. So for me, it's still okay to go back to your roots and have a little taste of that. So that's fascinating, James. Yeah.
Well, you know, that piece of transcendence is really important too, because, you know, growing up in a Filipino household, where, you know, I joined the military, and I ended up being doing deployments over to the Philippines. So I got to the Philippines about 6 times when I was in the Navy, and it's funny because and I think people would appreciate this. They would look at me and they would call me mestiza because they thought I was part Filipino. So I went wherever I went, and people welcomed me because I didn't have the white skin and the blonde hair. So it was, and when they presented me things to eat, because I had grown up, they were really surprised that I just sat down and ate with everybody, and you know. So this thing of transcendence, though, is about being able to adapt and to adjust, and it's a mindset, you know, because it's a mindset of how we think and how we do, because we can stay very rigid in our lives, and we can stay very focused and go, this is how my life is and this is what I want to do. And yet there's places where we have to be able to ebb and flow. We have to be able to create space, because things are going to happen in our life. Yes. And to be able to adjust as things happen is gonna really determine how we move, how easy we move through our life, because we normally make our lives very hard. We do.
I do make my life hard sometimes.
Me too.
Yeah, it's because of the, you know, the attachment, the rigidity, the
patterns and the behaviors that we grew up with, you know, and they run unconsciously, so we don't really know that we're doing that, although we are in some ways reenacting it over and over and over. Right?
The title of your book, I hope we could flash it on screen for those who are watching us live. The title is about Harold. I'm sorry, where's the photo that I took of that?
The title of my chapter was calling Redefining Harold.
Redefining Harold, exactly. So that's very catchy. So who is Harold and how do you really define Harold? I know you're talking about family, so go ahead.
And Harold was my stepfather.
Mhm.
So he was that Filipino element of it. And I'm the oldest of 8, but I'm the only child that's not of his blood. And my 7 brothers and sisters are. And so if you were to look at a picture of us, I look in some ways completely different than everybody else, you know? And so because I was the oldest, he put a lot of pressure on me to do a lot of things. And the way, and the what I talked about when I wrote the chapter was, it felt like, I felt like growing up that he didn't like me. And so it felt like, you know, there was, not only was there the pressure, but there was this piece of trying to make me somebody that I wasn't. And inside of trying to make me somebody that I wasn't, we really clashed. There were places. And so Harold had a very not high, I guess you would say, not high
Tolerance.
Tolerance is good, no, but I'm thinking about he didn't have a very high esteem of me, who I was, you know. So I grew up with lower self-esteem because he was constantly on me. You know, if I got a C, he'd say, why wasn't it a B? When I got a B, he would say, why wasn't it an A? So there was a place in some ways that he was never satisfied with that. And so I left home not knowing who I was and very without a lot of self-confidence. And so the idea about, and very angry. I was very angry at him because I blamed him for a lot of things that were happening. But the chapter was about how I transcended that because, you know, I carried that anger for 40 years in my life. And I got to a point where I realized that the only person that anger was affecting anymore was me. Because I left home when I was 18. And so we didn't live together after that. And yet the effects of the things that he did and the things that he said to me were lingering and became the backdrop or the character that was created of who I was. And so in redefining Harold, I had to realize that I could create a version of myself that was outside of what he said I was. And that was and not only that, in the process of that, to look, because I started to realize things, and that's what happens when you get older, right? You realize things. You know, he came from a mom that had 11 children. So yes. I would say right off the bat, she was very overwhelmed. And and because of that, she ran her house like with an iron fist. And I always thought when I was actually afraid of my grandmother when I was growing up because I watched what she was doing to her children, and she was very cruel to her children. And so I couldn't see that until I was in my 40s, that he was doing what he was taught.
Yes.
He was raising us the way he was raised. Right? But as a child, you can't see any of that.
No.
There's no way for you to be able to see that, you know?
Yeah.
So as I came to understand who he was, what I learned was compassion. Like, oh my gosh, this person is this way because of what happened to them. Can I step past where we were inside and what happened? Can I step past that long enough for me to look at it and go, okay, wait a minute. Let me look at the human. And when I looked at the human, I realized that the human was just trying to do the best he could as well.
And that is transcendence.
Transcendence. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. I could really resonate with your story, James, because my husband has the same story. He was also adopted, and he looks a bit like you. So, yeah. And he had this understanding when he was maybe like 5 years ago, when he said, my dad did what he thought was best. And it's the same thing, though, that, possibly the verbal abuse, or possibly the super strict military kind of upbringing. And my husband is also military. So what you pointed out about Harold is a Filipino, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
your grandma, your adopted grandma. So yes, this is a pattern as well among the older generations of Filipinos, or possibly Asians. I don't know. I don't want to generalize this idea, but there is a pattern of such high expectations for the oldest child, right?
It's especially when you're an immigrant, because you're coming to a country that you don't know. And so you're expected not only to fit in, but you're expected to live in some ways multiple cultures at the same time, right? And be successful at the same time, you know. And if you look at it for the Filipinos that came here to Hawaii back then, which is in the early part of the 20th century, right? They came here to work the pineapple and the sugarcane fields. So in reality, they came and they worked in servitude. I mean, they were, you know, not unlike, I'm going to use the word, you know, it was slave labor. And so life was really hard. And so the parents of those children were looking at this and really saying, you don't want this life.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And some of them in the family said, okay, and they went on to bigger and better things. But a lot of us got lost inside of the pattern, you know? And we allowed ourselves to be swayed by the negativity instead of being able to rise above it.
That's true. When we become hostage to the patterns that we hold dear for life, we hold them and they hold us, right?
And they hold us. And not only that, but they get passed from generation to generation, that idea of who we are. And so we're in a position now, you are, I am, our children are, of being able to break that pattern, right? And that's the place that I work with people all the time, is to be able to identify and show them what the pattern is, and then say, hey, now that we've looked at the pattern, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to continue to live your life the way you are, or do you want to change it and look at a different way?
True. So this ancestors that called you forth, that invited you back to Hawaii, your kupuna, correct? Is that the word?
It is.
You're talking about your ancestors from all the way back, you know, so did you feel, I read in your book that you were a little bit resistant, you were a little bit doubtful. Is that really, you know, and then you started saying yes. So is this part of the healing that is redefining Harold part of the healing that your ancestral spirits brought you into?
Yes, by all means, because what they did was, in that moment, they created such an interruption in my life. It was the first time that I had what people would say a clairaudient experience, which is what of hearing the voice, right? Yeah. And they said, it's time to go home. And in that moment, I was very successful, or I thought I was a successful corporate executive working in a very large company, you know, with lots of responsibilities and a good job and everything else like that. But I couldn't see that I was miserable because I was chasing the dream. And they got to a point where they went, wait a minute, he's not on the track that we have picked for him. We need to do something. And so they stopped me in my tracks, and they said, it's time to go home. And I heard it. And it was such an abrupt change that I literally walked into my boss's office the very next day and I quit my job.
Wow, that's radical.
It was very radical. And I tell people now, and I talk about this all the time, I say, I did that because that was the only thing and the only way I knew to make change, because I didn't have any tools. I didn't have anybody to talk to about this. and I didn't know any other way. So I had to walk away from everything. And I walked away from everything so much that I ended up like broke with no money, lost my family, lost my marriage, everything. I had nothing. And when I got to that point, that's in some ways the kupuna said, okay, good. Now we're ready to start. Now we're going to show you who you are, what you're supposed to be doing, and what the rest of your life is going to look like. And I was in resistance because it was telling me that I needed to change everything about who I was.
That's wow. Like a wow. You know, getting back on track, on a track that you never even knew probably existed.
No.
And you're pulled into that, and it's more like being derailed.
It is being derailed. And the derail needed to happen in some ways to get me on that track, because my train was going in a direction where it didn't need to go. Right. In other words, I was overweight. I had high blood pressure. I probably would have ended up with prostate cancer because I had a scare 20 years ago with that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was headed. That's where because my body was unhealthy and my mind literally was unhealthy. And so the getting back on track was realizing how the stories that I had been told had been driving my actions in my life, and how I needed to redefine those stories. Mm-hmm. Right? Which again, back to the chapter, redefining Harold, redefining that story.
Right. It's like rewriting your story. And along the way, you redefine Harold, you redefine James, you redefine marriage and work and everything else. Everything else. Wow. So that's the cover of the book that we're flashing right now. For those on the radio, you can't see that, but it's The Ultimate Guide to Self-Healing, Volume 4. And we are having a discussion with James Kawainui and his chapter. But that's the other book. The one that we're talking about, The Transcendence, is in his. Is this your second book, The Transcendence?
No, believe it or not, The Transcendent Man, it was my 8th collaboration with Laura.
Oh, I am ignorant.
No, it's okay. Don't say it.
Collaboration with Laura.
In 2020, again, my team came to me because they've been telling me that I needed to write my story, and they said you need to start writing, and I knew that I needed accountability to write. Mm-hmm. And let me see. Do you know Lulu Trevina? You met Lulu. Yeah, you met her through Laura's. Anyway, she's a friend of mine. I knew her from another group. And 2 days after I said I need to write, she sends me a message on Facebook and she says, I think I have something that's going to appeal to you. And she introduced me to Laura. So last year in 2021, I did 7 books. The Ultimate Guide to Healing, Volume 4, was the 6th out of the 7 books that I was in.
Oh, look at that. I'm flabbergasted. The 6th book, the 6th collaboration. You could write your own book right now. You're solo.
I am. And
you are writing one.
I am writing one. All of that was practice because there were a couple things that needed to happen if we're talking about writers, right? I wanted to find what my style was. Okay. And I wanted to be able to become comfortable with writing my stories and talking about my life. And I also wanted accountability. Mm-hmm. It's hard when we say, everybody says they want to write a book, but they're doing it by themselves. And when you're writing it by themselves, unless you're really disciplined and you get up every day and you set that time aside and nothing interferes with that writing, you're not going to write. Right. Correct. So I needed to have that accountability and to be able to build that accountability so that it became a habit. Writing became a habit for me.
Oh, that's so awesome. On that note, we are going to take a very short break, James. You can do whatever you need to do in less than 1 minute, and I will do the same
I'm not going anywhere.
Yes. So excuse us for a bit, friends, online and on air. We'll be right back.
Moving to Vegas? There's no better time than now. Where can you find a 3-bedroom home with a balcony and patio, with upgraded flooring, all appliances included, newly painted, move-in ready, with a community park and pool for under $400,000? Not to mention that it is so convenient to shopping, schools, entertainment. And of course, what is Vegas without the Strip? So what are you waiting for? Call Benjamina today at 702-281-9063. Mia is also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can also visit www.benjaminamiacasino.com and view available homes anytime. Remember, the house wins when you bet on Benjamina Mia Casino.
Just like a friend from back home. This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
Mic's on me now. Look at that, I have a happy face. Woo-hoo. Yeah, that's a happy face for me. We're saying hello to Mia, our partner in fun. She's recuperating from something, and I hope she's very well now. She's doing fine now. We are having a conversation with now I can say the word, an eight-time author, James Kawainui from Hawaii. And James, welcome back to
Thank you.
that. And tell us a little bit about the 8 books that you collaborated with Laura before I knew about them.
It's okay. It's okay. They were across a lot of different things, because I wanted to talk about different aspects. Some of the books, some of the stories that I wrote are aspects of the things that I work with people on. And so one of the things that I talk to people about is boundaries. And so one of the first books that I wrote is about creating energetic boundaries for people. Mm-hmm. One of the books that I wrote was about death and dying. I was part of that book that was about death and dying. So it was about self-care. There was a book that I was in that's called Sacred Medicine. And that book was about finding the sacred space inside of you. So there were lots of different pieces that I talked about as I was talking, because it was about learning how to understand ourselves on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. So in some ways, all of those 8 collaborations that I was on was talking to people or just my experiences and my stories of how my journey of finding out who I was and how I've incorporated that into my daily life.
So this Transcendent Men, is this the only collab with all men?
This is the only collaboration with all men. And it's really interesting you said that, because in volume 4, in the Ultimate Guide to Healing volume 4, there were 2 men. Yes. And in my work, I'm used to that, being in groups of people where it's mostly women. And that was the reason why Transcendent Men was so important, because it was men that were brave enough to tell their stories, that were brave enough to come together and say, hey, we are vulnerable, we hurt, we make mistakes, we learn. And I think that was a very important message So I hope this book reaches a lot of people because of that message. Because as men, we are hardwired and we are programmed not to show feelings. And if we had time, I would go into a whole thing that I've come into in my teaching about men and not showing their feelings and how that's happened and the societal I guess challenges that show up with that. So this book is really important because it was men that came together, is coming together, and we're saying, listen, we can do this a different way. We're here to help you. Because I don't think there's any man that's in that book that's not saying, I'm here if you need to talk to me.
Oh my God, I'm having goosebumps right now. Chills, angel bumps. That's what we call them. This book came at a time, for me, at least in my awareness, when women are rallying against masculine toxicity. What is that? Toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
When women are saying down with the patriarchy, when women are pushing themselves forward and upward, because there seems to be a race, there seems to be a competition between men and women. And I never really subscribed fully to that mentality that, we're better than, they're not better than us or something like that. But this book seems to even out the field for men and women who are on the awakening, the enlightening path.
There are men that are not working with their toxic masculinity, and that's what we wanted to show. This is my opinion. Okay, we are at a point in our evolution between in human history, right, where the reality is that you guys, and I'm talking about you, and I'm talking about women in general, you don't need us anymore. You really don't need us anymore. Because you have the ability to have a career, you have an ability to, not that it means a lot, but to make your own money, to have, to dictate how your life goes and everything else. And up until the past 2 generations, the world hasn't been in that position or in that way for us to be able to do that. And so women are looking at that from a standpoint of going, wait a minute, we have allowed ourselves to be subservient for so long. And we've listened to what the men were saying to us. And you're at a point that you're looking at that and you're going, no, not anymore. And so what it's forcing is not only forcing, is pushing women to change, but it's also pushing men to change as well. And because there's been this idea of being in control for so long, we're talking about thousands of years, right? Millions of years of that balance of the male dominance. That is changing, and it has to change, and it makes sense that it's changing, and it's time for that to change, right? And so how do we reorientate ourselves as men to live inside of that world? And that's why I think this book is so important, because it showed and gave examples by the men that were in this book or are in this book to give other men examples of that.
It's so powerful. It is so powerful that because I love men. I love I love my son, my husband, my friends who are male. I love listening to men who are, self-illuminating. I would use that word, who are understanding, or perhaps looking inward and seeing their power, not to dominate, but their power to co-create, their power to, let's do this together, and we are divine. So that's the kind of conversation that I'd like to have, and that's the kind of masculine energy that I'm looking to see in my generation and the generation that's coming forward with my children. So yeah, congratulations for that.
It's about true relationship.
True relationships. Yeah.
And true relationship is based on balance, right?
Right. The yin yang. Awesome. And you have several tools, James, for healing. I read, and some of them are familiar to me, but some others are not. And one of them you wrote about the egg. Yeah, the crystal egg. Tell us a little bit about that. It's interesting for me because I have a little egg here. I'm gonna go and get my little egg right here.
Selenite.
Yes.
Perfect. That idea came years ago through information that my kupuna, my team, I call them my team, gave to me because I was working with a lot of people that were our practitioners, and I still do. And I was realizing that we don't pay attention to how the energy of other people and the energy around us affects us on a daily basis, and it really does.
It does.
But for most people, they're unaware of the effects of that. And so the egg came about as a way of understanding. And the easiest way for me to explain it is that as we are able to create a field of energy around us, what it does is it buffers us from the energy that's outside of us. And so the idea of the egg is the idea of stepping into this egg, stepping into this field of energy where I feel safe, where I feel secure, where I allow only my energy to exist. And I watch and I allow the energy of the world to move around me because it doesn't have to affect me. So one of the easiest ways for me to explain this would be explaining the difference between sympathy and empathy. And I think most people get that, they're confused by that, right? Sympathy is I feel your pain. Empathy is I understand your pain.
Okay.
And if you feel someone else's pain, in other words, if you sympathize with somebody, then what you're saying or what you're doing energetically is you're saying, I feel your pain. So what happens is I just took your pain and I'm experiencing it as well, right? And then, so I'm feeling everything you feel. I'm feeling your anger, your sadness, whatever it is that you're feeling. When I can shift that mindset and I can talk about it in a way where I go, I understand your pain. It creates, not that it creates separation, but it creates a space where I can see that person, what they're going through, what they're feeling without having to experience it myself. So it's a really important concept, I think, for people to understand, because then what I can do is I can see myself inside the world and the world around me. Most of the time, we are inundated by the world around us, by the people that are around us. And everybody's had that experience of walking into a space or walking into a room and not feeling comfortable, or walking into a space and feeling very comfortable with the people that are around you. You are sensing their energy. But it's happening on a level that is unconscious for most people. So whenever they feel challenge, or whenever they feel something, or they feel an emotion, there's very little time where we look at that and go, wow, is what I'm feeling all me? Or is what I'm feeling the combination of me and everything else that I see around me?
So getting into your egg, so to speak, is a way of getting back on track.
Getting back on track. Yes. And I have a meditation for that. And we may not have time to do that on the air, but what I can do, if you want, is I can share a link that people can go to it, and they can download the meditation, so they can have an understanding of and so that they can actually be able to practice it themselves.
Yes, yes, that would be great.
If that's okay with you, good.
Oh yes, definitely, that's very okay with me. But I don't know how you're going to share that. Is that you're going to share screen?
I can share a screen. We are actually on Zoom.
Yes, we are on Zoom.
So I can share it in the chat, and if you want to.
Yes. Yes, there you go. Kuya Yo can copy that and put that somewhere in the show, whether
you can
they're
put
on the
that in
screen or on the comments below. And that's very thank you for that. You're very generous in sharing your modality for getting back on track. Yeah, for that kind the meditation.
When they shared this with me, they said share this with as many people as possible.
Okay.
And so I try to do that, and it's a very simple meditation. It takes less than 10 minutes. But what I would stress for people as they go and they do the meditation is this is something that you have to do over and over and over again. And it may take a few minutes. I mean, not a few minutes. It may take a few months for you to get used to it. But the idea of that is to practice it till it becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. Because that's what you're creating as a habit. So this habit and this idea of saying, I am going to take this time to make sure that my energy is contained so I can move through my day with less pressure, and some people call it ease and grace. And so, yes, can I move through my day without having to interact with everything that's around me, even as I recognize and realize that all those things are happening?
That would be a very good tool for a lot of empaths.
Not just empaths. I actually,
right?
I actually, yes, it's for everyone, but especially empaths, people that are energy workers. I actually teach this class a lot to people like nurses and doctors, and you know, it's a funny thing, but the people that are more affected than anybody else by other people's energies. Who do you think that would be?
Medical practitioners.
No.
Hairdressers.
I
never thought of that.
Well, think about it. You're working with the top 3 chakras in people's bodies,
yes.
and heart, 4 actually. So crown, third eye, throat, heart. So somebody that does hair, somebody does that is a beautician or does hair in a salon. Every person that they work on, they put their hands on their head. They're automatically in that person's field. They're automatically taking on whatever that person is. That's why hairdressers are hairdressers/psychologists, because they're always talking to people about what's going on. Because people, for whatever reason, and I know we're getting off track, but
we're on track. It's okay. Everything.
You sit in somebody's chair and they're doing your hair, and then it's almost like you have this space to talk about anything that you need to, and the hairdresser will let you do that. And I've listened to some amazing conversation because my ex-sister-in-law was a hairdresser, and when I needed my hair cut, I would just go sit in her salon till she had space to cut my hair. And it still amazes me what people talk about, but a hairdresser is being literally affected, bombarded is the word that I wanted to say, by people's energies. But you're right, health practitioners, even the office manager that's taking everybody's information, that's walking in, somebody that works, you live in Las Vegas, or somebody that is at the registration desk or the concierge or any of those service-oriented people. We are being bombarded by other people's energy. Yeah. And I think about Las Vegas, and I think about the people that are there and how strange the energy is and how people change when they get there. So they think that there's like free reign to do whatever you want to do, and it's okay. And think about the people that are in service and work in the service industry in Las Vegas and what's happening to them because of they're having to sit inside of that energy every day.
Exactly. Wow,
don't get me started. I get really passionate about this.
I know. This is such a very enlightening conversation, because who would have thought of hairdressers and how we take for granted the crown chakra, but in Asian countries you could never touch this part, the head. Yeah. You're never supposed to touch the head of anyone, and for us Filipinos, we do that a lot. We put our elders' hand upon our third eye.
Exactly.
Like that. And our
that's trend. That is direct transmission of information when that's happening.
Okay, that's good. And yes, awesome. And then the other one is when parents hit their children on the head. That's very damaging. That's
I got that done a lot to me when I was growing up. Hit. Hit. Yeah.
And so I really don't recommend that.
No, not at all. But you see what I mean when we talk about how we are affected by other people's energy, how all of that shows up in our world, and just to have an awareness of it.
Yes. So James, on our last few minutes stretch, what would be your words, I wouldn't say advice, or let's say brotherly words for men who are still cautious or hesitant to, go back into the past and heal the childhood memories or ancestral spirits, or, break some patterns from the past that are blocking their progress right now? What would be your words for them, especially Filipinos? So I don't know.
The first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is I invite men to be a little bit gentler with themselves. I know that sounds like it goes against what we were taught, but I'm talking about not how other people treat you, but how you treat yourself. Because we're really hard on ourselves. And I don't think that's just men, I think that's women as well. We are really hard on ourselves. So if I can be more compassionate towards myself, I think that's a good starting point. Mm-hmm. The other piece inside is to realize that we don't have to be strong. It's funny, my wife says sometimes that my vulnerability is way more sexy.
Oh, she's not the only one who says.
Yeah, and it's not. Vulnerability is not weakness.
No.
And see, we confuse those things. We confuse vulnerability and weakness, because vulnerability just means that I trust you enough that I'm going to talk to you about these things. That's really what vulnerability is. And so there's this place of, I guess the other thing that I would advise, or what I would say to people is one of the things to do would be to work on our trust. How we trust, what we trust, and that's the place where relationships change, because as we learn to trust each other, we will realize that there's somebody there that has my back. And men don't feel like there's people or someone there that trusts their back. We feel like we have to do a lot of it on our own.
Right. Wow.
Right.
The first word that you said was to be gentle. Did I hear it right?
You did.
Gentle. So that's what a gentleman really is. If you can be gentle with yourself first as a man, work and trust. Yeah.
So this is really maybe a good way to explain it. There's difference, because most people project their power into the world. And that's what really patriarchal or masculine energy is. I have to project my strength. I have to project my agility. I have to project my virility into the world. Mm-hmm. And our lives change when we realize, and I go, I don't need to prove to anybody any of that. I'm going to hold that energy inside of myself. And so when I hold that energy, instead of pushing it outwards, what happens is I build this energetic space inside of me that really starts to glow, and it radiates who I am. Without me saying anything, without me having to prove anything, it radiates the energy that I am. And what happens when that happens, and as it starts to happen, people go, ooh, what is that I feel? Who is that? I want to know a little bit more. And we actually attract people that way, because when we're radiating energy outwards, because we're trying to control what's going on. And right.
Awesome. Wow. I was going to say, oh, that's sexy. Isn't it? Yes. Wow. This has been a very good conversation, very juicy for me, James. And I heard one woman, she's an elderly woman, she said, the next time somebody asks you, how are you? She referred to all women. You say, I am moist.
That's a good word.
It's a good word. I am juicy. So this conversation is very juicy in the sense that you're squeezing stuff from all fields and putting them here, and we have a brew here, we have a juice, a concoction for getting ourselves back on track. And that's so powerful. And I feel so blessed to have you here with us, James. And I don't know how you're going to send healing energy to Mia. And I don't know if
I started
to do that.
I started before the broadcast already. So I just pictured her in my mind and just said, talking to her body to let go of what it's not needing to hold on to, so it can come back into a state of resonance and vitality.
Yes. Woo-hoo. I hope you heard that, Mia. So you can be back with us. You can be back on track. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Mia had to go through that so she can get back on track, make the title work for herself. So is there anything else you would like to say, James, before we close the show?
You know, there's one thing that I learned as a man, but there's one thing I learned just as a human being. And that is, we didn't come here to be by ourselves. We didn't come here to do this alone. And one of my biggest lessons I think that I've learned is how not only to trust people, but to ask for help.
Ask for help.
And sometimes that asking for help may be the difference in what we're going through, or making it a little bit easier, or getting through our day in a different way. And so if I was to leave something with everyone today, I would say not to discount reaching out when you need to and asking for help. It's actually a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, to say, I am struggling and I could use your help.
Awesome. So beautiful. Thank you so much. And how do you say thank you in Hawaiian?
Oh, mahalo. Mahalo nui, which means thank you plenty.
Mahalo nui. And how do you say blessings upon you?
That would be, blessings would be aloha pumihana.
Oh, okay.
Meke aloha pumihana. In other words, with warm regards. So I'm sending blessings. Aloha is an understanding of blessing.
So then, aloha, in all beautiful meanings of the word. Thank you so much, James. And
thank you for having me. I had such a wonderful time, and I know that you and I could sit and we could just like talk for hours. So
I look forward to your own solo book. I'm gonna get that. So that's it. That's the end for us here on the dot, and we want to see you again next week. So have
everybody,
a blessed week, everyone. Thank you.
Moving to Vegas, there's no better time than now. Where can you find a 3-bedroom home with a balcony and patio, with upgraded flooring, all appliances included, newly painted, move-in ready, with a community park and pool for under $400,000? Not to mention that it is so convenient to shopping, schools, entertainment. And of course, what is Vegas without the Strip? So what are you waiting for? Call Benjamina today at 702-281-9063. Mia is also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can also visit www.benjaminamiacasino.com and view available homes anytime. Remember, the house wins when you bet on Benjamina Mia Casino.
just like a friend from back home. This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV.